Hello and welcome to the Ready to Bloom podcast with your host Holly Wharton. Ready to Bloom helps heart-centered women entrepreneurs to overcome their fears, blocks and limiting beliefs so they can be more successful in business. As a heart-centered business owner, you do amazing work. Holly's mission in life is to help you help more people. Help us help more women in business with a quick review of this podcast. It just takes a minute to leave one today over at iTunes. The more women who find out about this podcast, the more we can help women in business. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to the Ready to Bloom podcast, episode 87. This is your host, Holly Wharton. I'm here with today's special guest, Tami Smith from The Dawning Point. Tammy is an advocate for entrepreneurs in emerging work. She's the creator of a free self-assessment called How Are You Actually Wired to Work? Her work involves becoming conscious of innate strengths and designing work to play to those strengths. Welcome, Tammy.
Hi, thank you.
I'm so excited to have you here today.
Well, yes, I'm equally excited to be here, so thank you.
Good. Well, why don't you start out by telling us about your background and your business journey and how you got to where you are today?
Sure. I had a long history of working in sales and marketing. And I was trying to think of how did I actually end up in sales and marketing? but I think that I had in some ways some of the personality aspects, particularly with sales. I liked people. I really enjoyed the, more, that connection between person to person. So sales was always more of, in corporate sales, it was relationship building and, growing accounts and growing business within accounts. And so I think that was primarily why I ended up in sales and marketing, but I was also a mom and I had kids and was trying to make that, balance between being there for my family and actually giving 100% to my work. That seemed like that was a constant struggle in my life. And there came a point in time where I knew something really significant had to change in my life if I was going to be good at anything. Because I always felt like I can do the work, and I always felt like I could do more if I could give more of myself to what I was doing. But I was just divided, and so it's like, how do I do this and how do I fit in and how do I belong? Because when I'm giving my all to my work, it's such a thing of joy. But I have all these other aspects of my life. I'm a multi-passionate person. And so for me, what that did was it created a little bit of hold back or resistance. And I'm suspecting that I was holding back in all areas of my life. And right around turning 40, where those things you're not going to escape it any longer, right? Like life says, no, it's now. You're going to look at this, you're going to look at this, you're going to look at your life and what you're doing and what you're bringing, what you're contributing to the world. And you don't have to play second fiddle and you don't have to constantly be compromising who you are to, you can find a way to really work in a way that's more authentic. That was kind of this is looking back now. At the time, it was just messy.
It always is, isn't it?
Yeah. Some great stories, but just to give people context of work experience, I moved from sales into sales training and ended up doing a lot of really, really good work in the area of sales leadership and sales training, and worked with a fantastic small boutique agency. And my last consulting job actually was at Google Enterprise, where I wrote all of the online training for their salespeople. And it was such an incredible experience to be there, on campus. I used to flew in almost once a week to work there. And it was really also changing in my perspective of what's possible and available. And that was it was one of those experiences that I was already, really drawn to technology. And not because I love technology, but I always loved what it could do for us. And as I was becoming, more and more aware of the possibilities and how just the average ordinary business owner could tap into these new tools and really revolutionize their business, I became excited, and I was like, I need to do more of this. I need to work more one-on-one with businesses and help them understand the technology side. So that's how I started my consulting business, and that was in 2008.
Ooh.
And so again, I've got, just to give some context, I had a lot of expertise. I had a lot of business success. At the same time, that was mixed, always with these experiences of, well, where do I really fit in? What is my work to do? Do I really belong? And being a multi-passionate person, being a mom and being, I don't know, just spirit. I think that the other thing too is, just that spiritual impulse to create something that's of more just what's mine instead of,
yeah.
I can help people with their technology all day long, but is that, what am I, why me? What am I, what's my part in this? That, I think, was the continuation. That was the theme that continued after I started my consulting business, which was really a lot more in technology and helping people to understand. Basically, SEO is where I landed.
Oh, wow.
That's what everyone wanted help with. So they're like, I just want more traffic to my site. I want my, right people finding me organically, and can you help me do that? And so that was the focus for the first 5 years of being a solopreneur myself, was working with other small businesses and solopreneurs and understanding the language that was really important to have on, what exact words, what language, how do you translate what you do into the kind of language that a person looking for that help, what would they search for? And just, kind of being more intentional about the buyer's journey. What does your buyer want? So that's basically search behavior.
Mm-hmm.
So mine wasn't in the technical SEO aspects as much as it was, again, in understanding the behavior of the person who was going to be searching.
So how did you move from this kind of sales and marketing background to SEO to discovering what your innate strengths were?
Right. So long story short, I'm a visionary.
Mm-hmm.
I've always been a creative visionary, and I saw an opportunity to make the process of understanding who is your ideal client and how can you create a content strategy to attract that person.
Mm-hmm.
I saw this way to do it differently.
Mm-hmm.
So I created a methodology and a tool, and I partnered with another business owner who who's a specialist in brand voice, and so added that component to it. So we co-created something, and we had an absolute just amazing experience of working together. It decided to go separate ways. She wanted to do something that was a little bit, more in growing her brand specifically in a different direction than this more holistic approach that I was taking. And when our collaboration ended, I looked at what I had and how I had created yet another kind of what do you call it when you're back at square one?
Yeah.
I'm back. I'm here again. Why do I keep creating things I can't sustain? I keep. What am I doing to create this experience yet again? I thought it was going to end once I was a solopreneur and had more control over what I was doing, that I wouldn't have these big changes in my life and these ups and downs. And so it was the best thing that ever happened to me because it gave me it really put that spotlight on what am I doing, what am I creating, and what do I want to create? Mm-hmm. Not what does the market need, not not what are my customers asking for, not what I wasn't looking for another collaboration opportunity. Just finally said, stop looking around, stop looking around and look in. And actually, so long before that collaboration ended, I had one of those aha moments where this name came to me, and I knew that I had to go buy the domain name. I was like, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. I just had no idea why or what it was going to be. But it was the dawning point. And the only thing I knew about the dawning point was that it had to be about internal conversations. It had to be about this. When I say internal conversation, I mean the inner stability, the inner resources, how are we as entrepreneurs, specifically solo entrepreneurs, how do we go about creating a better experience for ourselves? And this isn't about marketing, it's not about branding, and it's not about sales. This is about who am I and what am I doing and why does it matter? And, again, what's the internal conversation here? And so it's a spiritual conversation. So I could not for the life of me figure out what is this doing in my life and what is the dawning point, It was so far away from my experience and so far away from what I was doing and what I had just built up, my whole brand, what I was known for. I was known for helping people with, and here I am 5-6 years into my journey and it's changing drastically changing. And that's what the dawning point is.
That can be really scary to, build up this business, build yourself up as an expert in this field, and then make such a huge change to something completely different.
It is. It's terrifying. And yet I came to find out that this is what emerging work is. Emerging work is something that it's not coming from within. It's emerging. It's not coming from without. So while it's terrifying in some ways, there's also a sense that you're not going to get away from it. There's nowhere to go because it's in you and it's coming to the surface. And there's nowhere to go to hide, if it's yours. If you get that knock, once that knock starts happening on your heart and something starts emerging in your life, it's gonna get your attention one way or another.
You can ignore it, but it will keep coming back.
Yeah. So it was that sort of a thing, and there's real specific sequence of events that there was no turning away from the work that I'm doing now here in the dawning point. So that's the long messy story.
So what would you say are your top tips for someone who really has no clue what their deep inner strengths are and how to get in touch with that so that they can bring those strengths out in their business?
Well, the first thing is actually being able to look at it. I didn't know that I wasn't in my strengths. I had no idea. I had never worked in my strengths. So how did I know, right? So the first thing is actually giving some pause and saying, am I just doing what I know how to do? And am I doing what I've always done? And is this a capacity? Is this expertise? Or am I aware of my strengths? Can I name them? And I mean, I've studied Myers-Briggs and Enneagram types and Strengths Finder. I've done a lot of work around Strengths Finder. And yet they couldn't quite tell me what that had to do with how I was working. Specifically as a solopreneur, what I felt was that so many of these assessments that I, had taken and learned and studied were more about how I could fit into a team. Right? But so ironically, what happened was as I was looking at a lot of these different assessments, I started to look at the commonalities. What do I see over and over again, no matter what type of assessment I take? What am I seeing here? And actually what I saw a gap. I saw kind of a hole. I saw this kind of lack. That's what really scared me. In where I found that I didn't have a lot of strengths were in what I would call personal power.
Mm-hmm.
And one of, like, Sally Hogshead, her assessment tells you you're weakest, you're strongest and you're weakest, and power was my weakest there. And so, kind of got my attention. And then that theme started to come up. And so that brought a lot of questions around strengths as a solopreneur in general.
Mm.
And I thought, well, now how much am I compensating, for this lack of power? And maybe I should start really looking at how I can activate personal power. Maybe it just isn't activated in the same way that it is for someone else.
Mm.
And so that's the very first, I think, conversation that you want to have with yourself when you're looking at your own experience and looking at where you have been feeling any sense of I should be different than I am. That's the red flag. Anytime that you feel that any kind of business shame or judgment, or you're looking at someone else who seem to be doing so much better than you.
Mm-hmm. I'm not good enough.
Yeah, and whatever that area of judgment is that you have where you should be better, that's an opportunity to really look at what are those strengths? What would it look like if you were better? If you were more like that person.
Mm.
So when we look at that, a particular person, and most of us tend to look at people who are what I call intuitive doers. Mm-hmm. And they're people who just intuitively know what to do, and they don't mind making mistakes. Mm-hmm. And they just have a lot of personal power. And things seem to just happen. I mean, I kept seeing these stories online, constantly listening to interviews, how people would say, well, I started my business a couple of years ago, and oh my, it was really, kind of tough for a few months, right? But then this happened, and I did this, and I did that, and now I'm, everything's working beautifully. And I'm like, a few months, 6 years. This is not fair, right? So there's a tendency to only see and hear the stories of people who, again, they certain circumstances, certain strengths enable them to create a lot of traction, or something that from the outside looks really attractive. Mm-hmm. We tend to, I've worked with a lot of solopreneurs, hundreds, and I've listened to hundreds of people tell me about their experience. So this isn't something I'm just making up or projecting from my own, but from really deep listening. I know that there's a tendency to think that, there's something wrong with us. Or that
we should be different than we are. We need to be more of this, that, or the other.
Yeah, I think so. I think that we have so many models out there to look at people who have had some pretty quick success online, that we think we should too. Mm-hmm. And the point of understanding strengths, and in the assessment that I created, it's a way to really quickly identify 3 different zones of strengths. So it's not about, it doesn't take a lot of time to start to understand that there are certain organizing patterns. Mm-hmm. And there is a way that you will naturally produce your best work. Mm-hmm. And it's going to fall into a particular zone. It's going to fall into one of 3 zones. And your absolute, best bet is to work within that zone, to understand the nature of that zone. And when you can understand the nature of that zone, you can understand how your strengths are such a perfect fit for that zone.
Mm. And so what are these 3 zones, so people can get an idea of what you're talking about?
So the 3 zones, I've labeled them the creative visionary, the integrative thinker, and the intuitive doer. Mm. And it's a continuum. It's so if you take a line and you have creative visionary on the left and intuitive doer on the right, and you think of, let's say, the color blue on the left with the visionary, and green on the right with the doer, you've got this middle zone, which is more turquoise, right? Where the green and blue kind of come together. And then you take that and wrap it around so that, again, it's a continuum. It isn't a static process. But so the three zones basically, they follow the same logic of how an idea becomes reality, or how an idea is manifested. So at first you have the vision of what's possible, and that blue zone it's what doesn't even exist yet, other than our ability to kind of tap into it. So it's the complete and intangible. It's the things where we sense it, and we don't even know how to talk about it yet. Right? That's the visionary zone. Once you start to get a sense for what something is, and you start to develop the language for it, then it comes into the integrative thinker zone, which is all about honing in, what belongs here, it's the patterns, it's the signal to noise, right? So it's the discernment piece. And a lot of entrepreneurs, solopreneurs, work in that integrative thinking zone. They're the people that help us with our systems and our structures in understanding what should be included and what shouldn't be included. It's a lot of people who have, again, pattern spotters. They're probably integrative thinkers. They look at all sides. They consider a lot of viewpoints. There's a lot of wisdom in that zone, but it's more of creating the methodology. And then the doer zone that's where it happens. That's where work takes place. That's where the writing happens, the performance, the achievement, the taking action, the visible. Now that idea is actually manifested. It's happening, and a lot of success is visible when it's in the intuitive doer zone. We can see it. It's concrete. So we go from the abstract in the visionary to the very concrete, practical, tangible of the intuitive doer.
So what you're saying then is that we all kind of work in these three areas, but we have a particular strength in one of them.
Yeah.
Excellent. And so you have this online assessment that people can take, and so they can figure out how they are actually wired to work and play to these strengths. Is that right?
That's exactly right. Yeah. The assessment, it doesn't take very long, and then it comes with both a full report and then a presentation that really goes into just understanding what is the nature of that strength. So if you come out as an intuitive doer, you'll learn a lot more about what that means and what typical obstacles you would face as an intuitive doer. If you come out as a creative visionary, same thing. You'll get a presentation that really talks a lot about this is what it means to be a creative visionary. These are the common obstacles, and these are the things that you'll want to really pay attention to and to notice, so that you can start to understand how your strengths work and where you get the most leverage. Because what we want to do is we really want to tap in again to that place that it's so natural. Like it's who we are when we are being our absolute best and natural self. We tend to not see it or understand it and dismiss it, or even worse, judge it. And this is just it's a framework, I think, that can bring some perspective into seeing yourself in a way that you probably haven't been able to see before, because, again, you're too close to the situation, and two, you've probably judged a lot of the things that are actually supposed to be strengths. You've judged them as being somehow wrong. Or not enough, or
excellent.
It also,
I was
just going to say, it helps to explain sometimes like why you might be struggling in a particular area. So it's to me, it's a perspective tool.
Yeah. Definitely. I mean, I took it, which is how I discovered you, and I found it so accurate and so useful in ways that other assessments, and I love these assessments, but they're not always like, oh my God, I totally get myself now. It's kind of, often they're just interesting, but this was really useful, and it just really helped me understand myself in ways that I hadn't before. So I really recommend to our listeners that they, head to your website and take a look at that, because it can be very, very useful to figure out, how do I work best?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you. I mean, that is as a creative visionary, to me, my job is, to put a language around all these, what was coming to me. That's like, as I started to see and understand these three zones and the nature of these three zones and how we work, it took me a while to figure out, how do I make this accessible? How do I make this practical and useful? And that was my number one goal. Again, because I had tried so many other assessments. I had tried so many things. And while it helped me to understand myself, it didn't apply to working as a solopreneur.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't connect those dots. I couldn't figure out, does this mean that I shouldn't work as a solopreneur? Because
Mm-hmm.
Can I be, the biggest question was, can I be me and succeed? And what can I know about myself? What kind of an assessment could help me to understand how to be me and succeed on my own without, I don't, I think it's, I'm all for outsourcing and, working within my strengths. But the reality, as solopreneurs is we can't always do that. We really have to be able to do pretty much, to wear most hats in our business.
Mm.
And so it was just a practicality piece again. I didn't have a team and I didn't have a lot of resources and I was starting over again. And it was an imperative. I have to figure out how I can be me, understand who I am, understand my strengths, and work from there.
Mm. Yeah.
Work from there. So the interesting thing is what you do doesn't change. So I still do sales process. I still help people to understand, again, how to construct their offers in a way that is in alignment with what their ideal buyer is going to want, why they're going to want that. So value propositions and all of the ideal clients and sales funnels, I still do that work. The what hasn't changed, but how I do it has changed completely. And now I stay within my strengths. And I know how to create offers that keep me in my strengths.
Yeah. So could you tell us a little bit more about how our listeners could benefit from working with you? Because you've obviously got this fantastic self-assessment, but you've also got kind of a program that comes out of that, and you have coaching options. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Sure. Yeah. So obviously the best place to start is with the free assessment. There is a course. It's only 3 sessions, and it's called Playing to Your Strengths, and it takes those insights, everything that you just learned about yourself from the assessment. It takes that and it takes you into it's basically creating your playbook. It's a strengths playbook, and the course is me walking you through each one of the exercises in that playbook and helping you to make, again, all these insights very practical. It's like, what does this mean to you? What's your experience? And that is, to me, the most important thing that we do as business owners. This is the alignment piece that informs everything else in your work. So that's why I start there, and my clients, typically start there. After that Playing to Your Strengths course, then there's opportunities I have masterminds, I have a 30-day coaching program, and then I have a deeper program called Emerging Work Coaching. And again, if you want to go to the dawning point, that's one of those, that's the deepest work, and that's for people who have that knock on the door of their heart it just won't stop. And there's something new emerging in your life that has to integrate into your work. And it brings a lot of fears to the surface. And the biggest fear that you'll know you have emerging work going on, because you'll say, but who would buy that? That's not marketable, right? It's like what you start to see really scares you. That's, it's totally normal. That's how emerging work works. So I have a coaching program that works really specifically with people in that situation, and it's explained more on my website, probably much better than what I'm explaining.
No, it totally makes sense. And I've just gone through that process towards the end of last year, and it was so damn confusing, because it was like I knew something was changing in my business, and I had this idea, but I had no idea what the heck it was. It was like, how is this coming together? And just, trying to trust and sit with it and be like, okay, this is going to reveal itself, but I have no idea what it is, and just being really impatient. And it was a process, and it would have been very useful to have some help during that time.
Yes.
So I think that's really unique and very, very useful, because I think a lot of people go through that process when their business is shifting.
Yeah, and it's almost always tied to like a pretty significant shift in your life. So if there's a transition, and they go hand in hand. We bring ourselves to our business. So when something pretty significant in our life changes, and life is now asking us to integrate, and to move and to grow and evolve, and that we still have work to do. And there's a smart way to go about that. And it also includes permission to let insight have its own way. So it isn't a rushed process at all. It's a process in which we have a framework, because there's certain business aspects that have to be included in this emerging work. But there's also a lot of space for that higher intelligence, that what's informing this in the first place, right? That has to be given a voice. Yeah. Anyway, so for the most part, I would say that if anybody is curious about, maybe why they're having particular challenges, especially getting traction or getting clarity around direction in their business or change in their business. Most of my clients have been in business for themselves for 6 or 7 years. I've had a few people who are just starting off, and boy, I can't imagine. I was like, oh, I would love for everyone just starting off to be able to have this kind of a foundation. But I think that people that have been around for a while and have had the opportunity to really understand what does and doesn't work in their business, they're particularly drawn to this a little bit deeper work.
Yeah. And plus you've realized you've made some mistakes. You realize that, it doesn't always work out the first time, and you're drawn more to do that deeper work, to really figure out what the heck it is that you should be doing and how. Right.
I mean, we have to go through the process of trying the formula.
Yeah.
We have to know what it is first before we get to this point that a formula can only take you so far. Blueprints can only take you so far.
Yeah.
And then it's time to bring that, to dig a little deeper and understand what you are doing in a way that is completely authentic and differentiated from anyone else. Once you get to this, you never have that. You don't look around anymore.
Yeah.
And it to me, that when I hear people talk about being overwhelmed, I don't even know what they're talking about. I'm like, overwhelmed? No, because when you really know what your work is about, and you're working in your strengths, and your offers are within your strengths, it's so obvious, how to sell it and how to market. Those things become so clear. But it takes, but it does take that. It is a process.
Yeah.
It is a process. It's a process of internal alignment, and then external alignment, and then it's a very clear sales funnel in that customer acquisition, so you have that sustainability. But it's different depending upon what zone you work in. Like your entire strategy of how do you go about this. Your strategy should be different depending upon what zone you work in.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, Tammy, do you have any women business mentors, or are there any women in business who inspire you?
Just about everyone. You know what? For a while, I think I was really, I didn't know who to turn to. I was noticing how different everyone's story was.
Yeah.
And, when I would look for business mentors, I didn't even know exactly what do I need, who would be a good mentor, who would be a good coach for me. It seemed to me that was one of the most confusing aspects. The other thing too is, I came in to this consulting business online business in such a different way. Like I didn't go through B school or anything like that. And it felt to me like there was this whole world where everyone seemed to know each other. And I was really on the outside. And, because my world was more, from the corporate world. And I left that to be a solopreneur and started working with solopreneurs. And it took me a while to figure out what was going on here. So what I wanted to say is the reason that now there are so many people that inspire me is because I can see how like certain business coaches are just brilliant in the intuitive doer zone, and some are just amazing in the creative visionary zone. So I tend to look at what I need, what I'm right now, and then I could judge like how to get information from other people in a way that I'm not feeling like I'm wrong, or I should be more like them, or I should change what I'm doing, or anything like that. But so it's the diversity, it's the individuality, and how people that have come into their own and they step into that, and they're just doing their work, and it shines. I just love that. I love that.
Yeah, that's so inspiring to see. So, Tammy, where can people find you online?
So, the Dawning Point, and then Dawning and Point, the way that .com, and I always say that you'll probably catch yourself saying it dawned on me.
Yeah.
How many times do we say that? It dawned on me. And the next time you say that, it dawned on me, just stop for a moment and think about the significance of a dawning. Because when it dawns on you, it's like those dots are being connected, and it's an internal alignment. It's coming from something that is yours. It's not like that person told me. It's like, it dawned on me, I know this. This is your own realization. And they're beautiful. And I just really encourage people to give a little bit of pause, reverence. Like that's sacred to me when somebody has a dawning point.
I love that concept.
Yeah. So the dawning point is, really about both emerging work. It's about insight and intuition having a role in our business, and that we can have space and structure. This is a new world of understanding ourselves and our contribution. And so I think we bring all of ourselves to our work. And when we want to do that, when we make a commitment to that, we really start to give ourselves away. Like we start to become available to what life wants to do through us. And it's such a joy.
Yeah, I think that's just fantastic when it all comes together and it just flows and you've got that inspired vision. So, Tammy, thank you so much for joining us today. It was such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the conversation and the questions.
Great.
And, just the space that you're creating here for everyone. It's great work.
You're welcome. And I do recommend that all the listeners head over to Tammy's website and do that solo entrepreneur equation self-evaluation, because it just takes you, 5 minutes maximum. And the information that you get is really, really useful. So again, thank you, Tammy. And thank you to our listeners for listening. And remember to visit readytobloom.com/87 for the show notes on this episode. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Ready to Bloom podcast with your host, Holly Wharton. If you enjoyed this episode, remember to head over to iTunes and leave us a quick review of this podcast. Thank you.